Okay, so I've got high-speed steel roughing gouge. In fact, all of my turning tools are high-speed steel. So I'm not going to go into high carbon steel at all because I don't have any to show. The ideas and the techniques are all pretty universal. With high carbon steel, just go gentler, lighter touch, less time on the grinder, let it cool off. If it gets too hot to the touch, slow down. So we're going to take, first I'm going to start with a roughing gouge because the principles behind it and any of the flat tools all pretty much work the same. The key to sharpening any of these tools is to get the angle, the bevel angle right. I distinguish these and square tools from bowl gouges and spindle gouges that have any tools that have a constant angle. The technique I'm about to show is the same for all of them. You use the same methods to find your angle to reproduce it. You use the same light touch. You see the same holding position. The only difference is whether you've got a curved edge to sharpen or a flat edge to sharpen. It's not the case with variable pitch or variable angle or variable bevel tools like a bowl gouge like this, which is dusty as heck, but this one has a fingernail grind. Others call it an Irish grind, or there's a million different names for it these days. But the key distinguishing factor is that the angle of the bevel changes all the way around. So it's a totally different motion and movement technique. It shares some principles, but they're not all the same. Once you've found an angle, the rest of it gets a little more complex. For now, we'll just go into constant bevel tools. This also works for mortising chisels and any other chisels that you want to grind on your grinder. So bear with me for a second. The first thing we've already got a tool, and I'll see if I have enough lighting to get a good focus here. It's just a straight across standard roughing gouge. I think this one's a 1-inch. There's a couple of points to note. First, my bevel's already established the way I like it. If you need to establish your bevel, that takes a coarser task, and then you need to care what the angle is if you're shooting for a certain angle. But in the case of reproducing an angle, you don't care what the numbers are. You don't need a fancy jig to tell you what angle it needs to be at. In fact, I would argue that those jigs will mess you up because the length of the tool changes over time as you grind away, so the angle is going to steepen. So here's how I foolproof. Here's my as the fool, my method for finding and recreating this angle so that I don't change it every time I go back to the grinder. A couple of notes about a roughing gouge is, first, I want the edge, the front of the tool, the end of the tool to be square all the way across. I don't know if you can see that against my shirt there. It's square across the top. The other thing is that each of these little corners here, these little wings, can you see these little wings here? Are points. They're tipped. They are square to this bevel, this edge of the shaft, and this edge of the steel. These two faces, they're square to that. The idea there is it's the same tool all the way around its bevel, no matter whether you're turning it here or you've got it rotated. Let me see if I can do it this way. If you're turning like this, so let's say your spindle is here, if you're like this, or like this, or like this, or like this, anywhere you put that edge, since the bevel is a constant bevel and the tool tip is straight across like that, can you see that? Probably. Since it's straight across and these corners are square, the bevel, anywhere that's cutting, it's cutting with the exact same physics all the way around. And since this is turned in a cylinder, you have that entire edge to use before you have to sharpen. So what I'll usually do is I'll be turning in the center. For some reason I started in the center, I'm not sure why that is. And then as that part of the edge dulls, I'll turn it just a little bit. I'll roll the tool over just a little bit and use that edge. And I'll just use it up until there's nowhere, or until I run out of edge that I'm willing to use. And then I'll go back to the grinder and sharpen. Just another tip that's probably not necessary for the sharpening process, but the points made are that it's square across the top, and these little tips are corners that are sharp. They make a perfect good square corner, so you can use the side of your roughing gouge, if you hold it so that this flute here, this edge, this face right here that makes up this bevel, or not bevel, but this edge of the steel, if it's vertical, you can use it as a kind of a parting tool, sort of. You can use it to go up against the end of a tenon, or the shoulder of a tenon, so that you can get in there. So let's say my finger, this finger is a tenon and this is what's left of the material. You see how it's like that. I can go right up against it and make a perfectly square vertical shoulder there without having to switch tools. All of that is extra for free. So let's get to it. I'm going to show you how I find the bevel of this angle. I don't care what it is. It's probably close to 60 degrees, but I have no idea. It could be 65, it could be 55 for all I know. It could even be 45. It may actually be closer to 45. I'm not entirely sure. It's an angle that I want to keep because I like the way this tool acts. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a Sharpie, just make a mark. I'll show you here if I can get up close enough to make it so we can both see. As I'm going to make a mark across the entire width of the bevel here. I'll show you here in a second if it's not clear. You'll see there's just a little notch there. Because it's a constant bevel all the way around, I don't have to mark the whole thing, but if you want to, you can go ahead and do it. It's actually kind of handy when you're starting out to mark the whole bevel, because this way, when all the Sharpie's gone, you're pretty well assured, as long as you've made smooth, careful motions, you're pretty well assured that your tool is sharp. So now I've just colored in the whole bevel with Sharpie. I will show you next what I do at this point. Okay, you see here, there's a little bit of a gap right now, so we're not quite far enough. So we're going to pull the shaft out just a little bit further, and I may end up getting my head in the camera here, so I apologize in advance. I'm going to pull it out a little bit here, and that will bring the tool down. That brings the tool down. We're almost there. You can still see just a little bit of a gap yet. So we'll pull it out just a little more, just a little bit more, and that should be close. Now, I don't know for sure. This is just getting it close. The next thing we're going to do, let me zoom out here. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to touch the wheel a little and move it by hand just a little bit. Now, I'm going to show you what we see here. They're still up just a little bit because it only took steel off, or took the Sharpie off just a bit right there. There's none missing from any higher, so means we need to pull it back just a little bit further, and you can actually feel it, and this would be like less than 1/8 of an inch. You can actually feel it. Hang on a second. If we've got it right, the wheel spins freer, and I can already feel. And can you hear the difference from the last one? I'll bet you we're perfectly on. So what I'll do is I'll take a look. Ah, you see that? Let me zoom back in again for you. See the stripe? We took all of the Sharpie off. That means I got my angle set right. So that's where I tighten down my tool rest and I can begin to grind. Okay, so we found our angle by just barely spinning the wheel by hand, and it totally feels, you know you've got it. So now we're ready to sharpen. I'm going to put my guard down here. I'm going to put my tool in there, and we can turn the grinder on, and you'll see you put very little pressure. And all I'm going to do is start in the. It depends a lot of times for people. It's a matter of comfort. Some people like to start in the middle and roll out, and some people like to start at one end and roll to the other. However, you have to move the tool so that you get even removal across the entire bevel, so that you keep that square end is the only important thing. So as long as you're doing that, it doesn't matter what way you remove the steel, as long as there's an even cut of steel all the way across, and no facets on your bevel. But I'm just going to go ahead and grind now. I'm going to put this up so I get less glare. and you'll see how lightly I touch. Hold the tool while I start and I get this edge. So there's the handy thing about a roughing gouge is that there's these nice flat sides, and you know you're square when that flat side is vertical. So what I'm doing is I'll start it about here so that this side is pretty well plumb, right about there, so that this face is straight up and down. And then I'll do the same, I'll roll all the way across until this side is straight up and down. That's hard to video, I'm afraid, but the idea is you kind of keep the tool, just roll. I'm going to do another quick grind so you get a feel. And the key is not to dwell on any one spot. There's a burr in here. Now, there's a lot of philosophies on whether or not you hone a roughing gouge or whether you hone your tuning tools. I don't. Because I want to go right back to the grinder and right back to the lathe and right back to the grinder and right back to the lathe. This gets me back turning faster. Yes, honing may give me a sharper edge, but this is a roughing gouge, so I don't bother. The only tool I actually hone is my skew, because a skew is acting like a knife, and the sharper it is, the finer that edge, the better surface it's going to leave, and the longer it's going to last. With a roughing gouge, there's enough other stuff happening that I have not found it worth the time to run and hone the edge at all. And I'm also not very good at doing it by hand, so this is it. I go from my, I think that's a 120 grit wheel, straight back to the lathe. And it has never caused me any trouble. I may not turn as often as others. Maybe that's the case. But that's how I sharpen a roughing gouge. Thanks for watching.